Hello.
Hello, Renee. Hello, everybody. Welcome to
Hello,
another
everyone.
episode of Red Lipstick Talk. Who got your lipstick
Yes,
on, Renee?
got it on. You too.
Me
Our red
too. It's a little dark today, but I got
lips.
it.
I love that you're outside in nature.
Girl, gotta be out in nature when we can because
Hmm.
air quality's good. There's no fires right now. So when those
Oh,
moments
yeah.
happen, we have to take advantage of the blue skies and be grateful.
Nice.
Be grateful. Just be grateful for these moments because we don't know
Hmm.
what will happen tomorrow.
I
Um,
know. I know.
so yeah,
Yeah, I spent the whole day in nature myself. And it was just so nice. Like I was at the Lagoon in Portuguese, Lagoa. It was just, yeah, and it was just nice sitting under the tree, just by the water. Oh my God.
yes, we all. That's been kind of the saving grace. I don't know for you, Renee, but during this whole quarantine pandemic, the moments I would go outside, beside the grocery store was some tiny bit of nature. It could have been a block of nature of some trees, but something to just, even just the colors, right? The colors
Hmm.
just um, bring light to our eyes, brings energy to our being, and how important and how um, central being in nature is for us, and important
Yes.
for healing and just feeling okay and good, even for an hour or just for that day. So,
Yeah, it's so true. Like literally, I spent the whole day at the lagoon, and it just really did re-energize me, rejuvenate me to commune with nature.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
and it's the kind of nature, I don't know about you, but I'm the kind of like I love it when it's just me and I can hear the wind and the trees and the birds and the, minimal
yes,
talking. I have a
me
hard
too.
time going to the beach and then it's rowdy. I'm so
Yeah.
antisocial, I've realized. And I think this quarantine has made me more antisocial. But there's nothing like being in nature and feeling like the connection is really intimate between you and these
Mhm.
elements. And sometimes our chatter gets in the way. I don't know how you feel about it.
You
I'm,
know,
yeah.
and it's so interesting that you say that. Like, I feel that same way, and people would never think that because I'm so like bubbly and social and outgoing and always talking to people and laughing. But that's a lot of work. Like, I get drained, and so
Yes.
I tell people all the time I'm more of an introvert than an
Yeah.
extrovert, right? And so I think that's the thing that I like about being in nature. Like, I love going to the beach by myself. I love going to the park by myself, and I
Mm-hmm.
love just sitting and being in nature and being in silence. And
Mm-hmm.
so like even today, like once the kids started coming out and everything, it was just like a lot. Like it's cool, but it was nice when I had that alone time and I was just sitting and laying out on my little conga sarang, I mix up words in Portuguese, English, whatever. So it was
So
nice. It
good.
was nice, and it was just needed. So we're
Yeah.
gonna be. I see people coming on. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Say hello as you're coming on. We are gonna be
Woo.
going into sexual health, but like as you're coming on, Nefertiti and I are just talking about nature. She's in nature, and I was in
And you
nature
were
all
this morning.
day. I was this morning. And so it's just so important, there's just so much going on right now. So much with the injustices of this world. I mean, the Breonna Taylor came up, recently, just the
The grand
verdict.
jury.
And so,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just like, I needed to be in nature first and foremost. I was angry. And I'm not gonna lie, like my instinct is like, we're at war, we need to fight. And I was just like, okay, Renee, let's be in nature, do some breath work, and I needed to get my time to regroup so I could be strong and do what
Mm-hmm.
I need to do
Mm-hmm.
during this difficult time right now.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes, yes,
know?
I echo that, Renee. It was incredibly upsetting, infuriating, heartbreaking. You go through all the emotions of grief, of trauma, and anger. And I think I'm still really angry, trying to do as much action as I can from home. My mother just had surgery, so I can't be in the streets as much as I would like to. The crows is upset as well. I don't know if y'all hear that.
You could
But
hear
I
it.
think the point about nature is um, it's not something that is only for when the sky is blue and the sun is out for our enjoyment. It is also a source of healing when we're going through
Yes.
all these emotions. I think you know just sitting and listening and perceiving the way the winds move things, the impact of fire on things. I'm in California, so what fire has meant and his meaning has been really intense. And yeah, just really, I think thinking about sexual health as well, right? We're continuing that
Mhm.
conversation today, thinking about suicide prevention, because September is also Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Thinking about, like, in a real way and not like a hippie way, what is the role that nature plays in our lives, and how does that impact both our sexual health, our mental health, right?
Mhm.
Our sense of belonging, our sense of place, our sense of purpose. And yeah, I've been reflecting a lot about that, because I think with this quarantining, it's really isolated us so much more socially. And what is still available for us is nature, right? Is
Mhm.
these natural places, the trees, the sky, the ocean if you're nearby. But really thinking about how is it that we can really be more attuned and aware of that relationship, right?
Mhm. Mhm. And that's beautiful. And I like that you said that because so many people take being in nature for granted. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm fortunate that I live like literally at 2 blocks from the beach, but
Mm-hmm.
a 15-minute walk to the lagoon, to the lake,
Mm-hmm.
or I can take an Uber ride and be at a park in like less than, 10 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
so I try to be very conscious of
Mm-hmm.
being in nature when I need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that so many people take that for granted, like if they don't have, like if they're not so close like I am. So if you're in a city life, but I think that there's things that you could do even when you're in a city. So I remember when I lived in the DC area, and during my lunch break, if I was just really sure, because I worked, in a high stressed environment. I used to work in a
Mm-hmm.
crisis center. And so in a
Mm-hmm.
crisis center, I was constantly dealing with suicide cases, homicide cases, like schizophrenic, like, so it was intense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would literally pack my lunch and I would just eat lunch at a park. I would just drive and I would sit and I would eat and take a nap at a park. Not
Mm-hmm.
even, not even like needing to just meditate, but it just being in nature did something. And
Mm-hmm.
so these are things, even if you're driving, and this is one of the things I used to also do. Like in the winter time in the Virginia area, there was this long, windy road, but when it would snow, it just looked beautiful. So I would take that road just to see that. Or when it was a fall, the leaves were like brown and
Mm-hmm.
orange and red
Mm-hmm.
and changing colors. So as opposed to taking the highway, which would get me quicker home, I would take this long, windy road
Mm-hmm.
just to really enjoy the view on my way home. So that's just
Mm-hmm.
something simple that could be done, even if you live in a city, being able to go through and
Yes.
see the
Yes.
trees.
Yes, see the trees. And sometimes, I hear you, Renee, in terms of access. Like, I feel very privileged because I'm at my mother's home right now. She lives in a very green area. We grew up in a suburb of the Bay Area, and the Bay Area is already, known for having access to all of these beautiful natural areas. And, I've also been, when I was living in Salvador, so the first half of the quarantine, I was in Salvador in a neighborhood that used to have a lot of rainforest, and and in Salvador, a lot of, I don't know if people know about Brazil. so many cities and different areas of development in Brazil were rainforests, and the way they've been sort of developing it has not been a sustainable way, has not taken into account biodiversity and just our well-being in relationship to that, right? So where I lived, there was some remnants of rainforest and nature, and then there was also this stark contrast of lots of concrete. I lived in an alleyway, no trees, a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would do what I could just to get, a little patch even of an almond tree that was still growing, and really just, first of all, I always, ask permission wherever I am to the ancestors, indigenous ancestors of the area that I'm in, um, to be there and to connect with that energy and with whose land that is and the ancestors that are underneath this earth. So I think that's a practice that's also good if we're thinking about engaging with nature in a way that, um, you know, looks to liberate our generations of colonial trauma and occupation, is to really, whatever space we go to, whether it's a park, whether it's, a little tree in the middle of a block, just recognizing, hey, I'm asking permission to the ancestors of this land to be here, and I want to thank them for this opportunity. And just that intention and that thought, it changes my relationship with that tree or with that park. It really
Mm-hmm.
makes it, it really makes it about a relationship that is ancestral, a relationship that is, beyond here and now, and that is also my right and
Yes.
part of my need, and also my need to survive and to thrive. Like, we really need this. We need these connections, and we have a right to them. And I think for so long we've been taught that, well, we've been put in, we haven't had control over the places we're allowed to be, whether it's economic conditions, whether, so many different factors that go into where we can or can't be. I know you grew up in Brooklyn, so I don't know what it was like in Brooklyn, if you were able to find a tree somewhere here and there.
That
But
concrete jungle, no.
yeah. So, I think it's just just setting that intention wherever I go, it changes the relationship to where I am. It makes, it's very, it makes it about a relationship that is, yes, about nature, but also about our ancestors, and reclaiming land and territory.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it's so, and it's, and you brought up earlier just in terms of how with nature, being in nature could help with their sexual health, the suicide prevention. So we have so many topics and it's all connected, right? And so our sexual health, it's, if we're not connecting to nature or we're not grounded, it it makes it a lot more difficult as well to be connected to yourself, be connected to your
Hmm.
body,
Hmm.
and so for us to be able to be at our best sexually in terms of health wise, we need nature. We need nature any little way that you can. If it's getting that little patch of park. So one of the things that my parents did, we had a lot of trees. We had a lot of plants in our house, right?
Hmm.
And so that gave us nature within our house, within the city in Brooklyn,
Hmm.
like where we live. So there was tons of plants. Have plants in your home if you can. Connect to that soil. One of the things, because I like to work with like yoni eggs or even the crystal dildos now, that's new. One of the
Hey.
things that I've learned to do is to put the yoni eggs, the crystal dildos, in the earth, so that it can just kind of cleanse. It can cleanse that
Mm-hmm.
energy, cleanse from past people that's touched it. That's the mining, the working to get it in the shape that it's in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, I can't talk that well. I've been in nature so much. I'm kind of zenned out. So, guys, I hope you're all kind of understanding what I'm trying to say, the words that are trying to come out of my mouth. But anyway, so that's a way, if you're not in a city, being able to be, bring that nature to you. And so, going back to the connecting to nature and sexual health, I love you using the yoni eggs, the crystal dildos. I put it in the plants. You can put it in the plants, and that's one way that's grounding that energy, that crystal. So then when you're working with it, it's also giving you that healing, that energy where you're also connecting to your ancestors, like Nefertiti was saying, when you're in
Mhm.
nature. That is
Mhm.
a way to really connect to that soil, to those who were in this land before you.
Mhm.
So it's a deep process. So I think everything having that consciousness, that awareness, and doing things with that awareness really helps.
Mhm. Mhm. It helps, and it's funny, Renee. I think there's kind of like different layers of how nature nature relates to ourselves as sexual beings. I think one area is um, sort of how we relate to nature ourselves with nature, so not with
Mhm.
necessarily with other people or in a sexual context, and how that impacts our sexual lives. And I think another way is when we actually are inserted, or we insert ideas and practices born out of nature into our sexual practices. I don't know
Mhm.
if that makes sense. There's like two ways that it kind of can play out. And I think for the first one, speaking in terms of like how it impacts my relationship with nature, how that impacts my sexual relationships, it really sets you up to listen to who you're relating to in a
Mhm.
different way. I think one of the most important things when we're thinking about sexual health with other people is how is it that we're listening to who we're having sexual
Mhm.
relationships with? How is it that we're listening to their bodies, to their breath, to
Mhm.
their, dryness or hydration, to their words, right? I think
Yes.
it sets you up to listen with much more sensitivity, because in nature there's so many messages, but it requires a level of listening, of active listening and sensitivity to sort of to sort of hear it all. And so that's
Mhm.
something that's come into my relationship sexually, is and really hearing myself as well, and understanding when something, when there isn't sort of synergy, what elements were not necessarily balanced, right? That sort of
Mhm.
allowed that to happen. And I
So
think
when you were
that's,
talking, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Now, I was just gonna say, so when you were talking about like in terms of how you're relating to yourself, right? It just made me think about cuties, right?
Uh-huh.
So I watched
What is
last night's
cuties?
cuties. So if anybody hasn't watched cuties, spoiler alert, okay? But cuties it's actually really good, and I think it's important for this month, for the sexual health month. And as you were talking, I really got scenes. So it's Cuties is about a girl who's 11 years old
Mhm.
who's trying to find herself. She's trying
Mhm.
to see where she fits in, right? And so she grew up in a family that's Muslim, and so the family that's Muslim, they never talked about sexuality. They're wearing long dresses. She saw how her mother was just really suffering, right? Just within that relationship. Her dad left the mom, ended up getting married to another woman, and the mother had to just kind of, she was alone crying and sad, but then she's like, putting this happy face for everyone else, like, oh yes, I just hope that he's happy, and we're going to do this big old party. So this little girl is seeing this, right?
Mm.
Seeing how all of this repression and all of this stuff. And so then this girl starts to see one of her neighbors, another little girl who's like free, and she's dancing, and she has a little half shirt on, and she's like,
Mhm.
oh my god, like, I want this. So she just kind of started taking off to like try to be with this girl. And so I think my internet is messing up. Um, so anyway, basically, so she's trying to find herself, find out who she is. So she had the one extreme of her family, basically covered up from head to toe, and then this other extreme. And the important thing is, I decided to watch this last night because I was like, so many people there's a big old fuss about this movie Cuties, and they're like the the sexual exploitation of little girls. So I was like, let me see this, because I work in this area, so it'd be something interesting. But one of the things that I just watching it, I thought that this was very much an important film because we don't talk about this enough. We don't talk
Mhm.
about sexuality. And
Mhm.
so I can understand what people are saying. You got these little girls at 11, 12 years old, 13 years old, who are dancing and shaking, but kids are doing this, right? And they don't have anyone to talk about. And so when you look at this girl's journey, I'm trying to fit in and trying to find out who she is sexually. She ended up starting taking provocative pictures and putting it up on social media, to the point where she actually took a picture of her vagina, a vulva, and put it in social media. And then there was a lot of backlash. So how many little girls are going through this, but they don't have anyone to talk
Mm-hmm.
about what they're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
where they're trying to fit in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this movie was important for us to see that these girls go through that. And it
Mm-hmm.
was the same thing you saw. There was no talking about when her menstrual cycle came. It came, and then her great auntie was like, saw the red, you saw the red bleeding, and she was like, her great auntie laughed and it was like, welcome, you're a woman now. And that was it. There was no explanation of what to do. And so many girls go through that and they don't have different conversations with their parents, with their moms, and they struggle. They
Mm-hmm.
struggle in silence, or they struggle with their different friends learning
Mm-hmm.
things the wrong way,
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I used to work as a therapist, I had so many kids, so many little girls who wanted to maintain their virginity. And so they would have anal sex. And I'm like, these are things that these kids need to talk about. We need to talk about these things. They need to have a
Mm-hmm.
safe space so they
Mm-hmm.
can understand what the repercussions you
Mm-hmm.
know, of whatever their actions are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a movie or is that a show? I'm so out of
It's a movie.
it's a
It's a
movie.
movie. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
movie. I definitely recommend watching it. Well, honestly, I don't feel like it was that great. If we're gonna go into movie critics, I didn't feel like it was great, but it was good, and it was important. It could have been done better, but it was important in terms of talking about the sexual health, especially
Mm-hmm.
sexual health for
Mm-hmm.
kids. So what was you growing up? What was that like? Did you talk to your mom about sex? Did you get to talk about the birds and the bees?
No, I think that there's a couple things that you brought up that I wanted to touch on. I think there's something to be said about making space for um, guiding the younger generations in discovering their sexual identities and exploring them, and and really learning what it is to have ownership over that and have autonomy, right? Over our bodies, over our minds, over the kinds of relationships we want to have. I think that is, if someone had come to me when I was 12, 11, started to have feelings for other people and feel attraction about, like what it, we kind of, I knew what this was because of movies, like, silly teen movies. We grew up in the 90s. There was all these silly teen movies that gave us a sort of like uh, uh, chauvinist representation of what it means to be sexual, right? But there was no
Mhm.
intimate, safe space to ask questions, to check in with someone regularly. I think that my parents did the best they could. My father didn't really talk about this at all with us, and then my mother, she was very protective and afraid. So those were the relationships I had with my elders in my life about what it meant to be sexual is something that you need to sort of be guarded about. Um, and it's something that happens and you feel like you need to do, but we don't really know our direction. And so, I've thought a lot about this, Renee, because I have a niece who
Mhm.
is a teenager, and I know you have a niece who's early 20s, and that generation has access to the internet and information like we never had. And I
Right.
think totally shifted the landscape in terms of them exploring their sexual identity, what it means, sort of knowing a lot in through this information gathering, and not necessarily through a lot of experience. And that's been great, because I feel like my niece is somebody who's been someone who's exploring her sexual identity because of who she is in community with, her friends. And also I think the internet has a lot to do with it, like who people are following,
Hmm.
who these people are, Cardi B, whatever you want to say. It's in the music, it's in the movies,
Yes.
in the culture that we consume as well. And I think the culture we consume today is much more conscious about um, sexual empowerment, sexual safety. And I think that's something that I see a lot in how my niece is growing up. Um, yeah, so that's like a great thing that I've been seeing with her. And I hope, I've me being someone that's older, like leaving that window open is like, hey, you can come to me and talk about any of these things. I've been gone for so long, so I don't know if she feels that open. But how is
Hmm.
it that we also show up for for that generation in a way that makes them feel safe, in a way that's like kind of more exciting and engaging than the internet, but it is more personal. So I think there's all these
Hmm.
things. I think that how we create a relationship around discovering sexual identity with the younger generation is still something I'm figuring out, and I think it's
Hmm.
something that we didn't really necessarily have.
Right. And I think so, and some of the time, some of the kids don't really feel comfortable talking with adults about these things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So sometimes some of the kids feel completely fine, and others are like, oh, gross, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's important to respect, where they're at, and when they do come. I think creating, like you were saying, I think there's also ways that you can create that safe space. You can create
Mm-hmm.
that place
Mm-hmm.
for them,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how far you live. And that's been one of my challenges as well, my struggles, because I always used to be very close to my nieces and nephews, but then living abroad for so long, it naturally creates that distance. But I try,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of whenever I'm back home, I try to make sure I'm back for any important events,
Right.
so, and I let them know all the time, I'm here. We could talk about anything,
Right.
honestly,
Right.
so yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
communication for the youngers is part of our sexual health as well, right? Like, how are we communicating about sexual health with the people we care about, whether we're, in sexual relationships or not? I think we've really expanded on what that means, as sexual health being something that's about your relationship to yourself,
Mhm,
your relationship to the people in your life, and how we are all exploring our sexual identities and sexual practices, and then the people that we're engaging with sexually. I think it's always kind of been flipped. We think of sexual health first off as like, well, who are we engaging with sexually? And I think that's not, I think really flipping the thinking where that is not actually the primary relationship when we think about sexual health can really shift
mhm.
stuff as well.
Right,
So,
right. So true, so true, so
yeah.
true. Ooh, that's a
Nature,
lot,
sexual
nature.
health, everything, everything.
And this was nice. I like the way it went. So, because originally our plan was to kind of piggyback from last week and
Right.
continue sharing our stories and our experiences sexually. But I think this was important. It was good to. I'm glad, first and foremost, that I saw
Yeah.
cuties last night,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's important to talk about. So it was nice. It was nice, nice, nice.
Yeah, I think the thing with cuties too, and I don't know if you want to share more about what it's like for you in Brazil from your personal relationships, but thinking about sexuality is beyond who I'm relating with sexually. When I was in Brazil, thinking a lot about how how men and women expressed who they are as sexual people, definitely impacted my own sense of being able to sort of wear my sexuality on my sleeve, so to say.
Mhm,
I think growing up with the sort of fear that my mother placed in my head, and also having the male gaze, starting at such a young
mhm,
age, you start to sort of close in on yourself out of fear. And I think living in Salvador for so many years, where there is an embracing of sexual power and expression, and your body parts, and letting it sort of be out there, but not necessarily always implying something sexual, really shifted my also sense of how I carry myself in the world as
Mm-hmm.
somebody who does know she has sexual power, as someone who does know that she has sexual strength and sexual attraction, but that's not something that needs to be hidden, and that's not something that I need to um, be necessarily excessively protective about, because I'm also aware of how to engage it. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's been something for you, but that's really been a huge impact on my own sexual identity,
Mm.
is that
Well,
experience.
I would definitely say moving to Brazil has had
Hmm.
an impact on my sexuality. You know, I've always been very sexual. I've always had a lot of sexual energy, you know. Even when I was a kid, 11, 12 years old, boys were always thinking that I was flirting with them. And they'd be
Hmm.
like, "Oh, you're flirting." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." Like I was just being me, right? But they took it as me being flirtatious. Um, but again, because my family was very like conservative, all of my family's conservative. I'm the crazy outgoing one out there, right? And so I always kind of had to taper that. I always had to bring myself, okay, Renee, like this is how you have to be, right?
Hmm.
But coming to Brazil and just seeing that feminine energy, that sexuality as just a natural part of life of being.
Hmm.
And you know, there was nothing wrong with that. Like I love the fact that I could go to the beach and see someone wearing a thong. Didn't
Hmm.
matter her size, her shape,
Hmm.
her age. She's wearing a thong. You know, I've seen so many older women um, wearing like really short shorts or short skirt, and I'm like, yes, own that. And I think you know we were talking last week about this the stereotype you were bringing up, and I think that a lot of times when we're coming from like the US, for example, or someplace where it's very repressed sexually, we look
Hmm.
at something that's just so natural and we automatically think, oh, there's, you know, they're having sex and they're doing all kinds of things and all of this. So,
Hmm.
looking from that mind, it's easy if you see someone who's just dressed because they, you know, this is comfortable. It's hot as hell out here. So, I want to
Right.
be comfortable and,
Right.
you know, stay cool. Then you're like, oh, she must be fast. She must be easy, you know? Um, so so for me it was like yes I can actually be okay being in my body and showing my body off if I want. I'm a nudist. Like anytime, any chance that I could go to a nude beach, I'm going to a nude beach. Anytime if there's no one around at a regular beach, I'm taking off my clothes if I can. Try not to get arrested, but I mean I really prefer to just be natural, you know. And
Hmm.
and it's just so freeing. It's so freeing to just be able to be yourself, you know, and not have all of these restrictions placed upon you. And this is one of the things that I like, you know, when I traveled in Europe, like specifically Portugal, pretty much all of the beaches were topless, you know, like
Hmm.
any beach. And you have kids there, you have everyone. And it's just such something that's so natural. So when something is just so natural and we're used to seeing it, then we don't make it so much of an issue, right?
Hmm.
Like drinking alcohol. When you're in France, you just drink alcohol or whatever the age range. You don't have so many people abusing it, getting
Hmm.
into car accidents and all these things. So it's that same thing. I think that we need to be able to own our bodies, own our sexuality,
Hmm.
and um, and own ourselves. Really, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I think there's this element of also feeling like we have a right um, to be in our bodies and express it. And I think that comes along with how do we create you know, context where we feel safe enough to do that. And I
Hmm.
think,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's like the parallel work, right? Like we get to this point of getting to the nude beach, I'm gonna be free, but in my mind, at least for me, there's always this lingering fear in the back of my mind that comes from being raised by someone
Hmm.
who, and you know, who had sexual trauma as a child, who
Hmm.
wasn't given her right to explore that on her own and in her own terms was taken away from her. And so, you know, how do we make space for that and continue to make
Hmm.
space for that and negotiate that very real fear with you know, with also like calling out calling out the kinds of sexual abuse and violence and oppression that restricts us from being free, right? So
Hmm.
just thinking about sexual health
Yeah.
is also fighting for those things too.
Yes. So
It's a
true.
lot,
So
y'all.
true. It's
it
a lot, and and
it
those
ain't
are some
just sex with somebody one night. There's
right.
all there's
And
all
those
this
are some great
other
questions.
stuff.
Some great questions, and it's important to think about because honestly, the reality is real, and these things
Mhm.
happen. You know,
Mhm.
majority of women I work with, um, 9 out of 10 of them have been sexually assaulted, in some way.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, so yeah, so it's important to be able to reclaim your sexuality, reclaim yourself, but also be able to be safe. And I think
Mhm.
that work comes in. uh, it's work. It's education. Honestly, it's
Mhm.
education.
Mhm.
And I think the more that we take away the taboo from sexuality and we talk about these things, then that's going to make it easier for us to be able to feel safer. Because when we
Mhm.
get rid of that taboo and we talk about these things, that that gives room for us to learn from other people, to be able to
Mhm.
be safe.
Mhm.
And it takes away that taboo from men, so that men are not like what's the word? I'm thinking in Portuguese right now, but like so men are not um
What's the Portuguese word? Maybe I can help.
well, what I want to say is not being fixated, right,
Right.
on that sexuality, on that woman, because a lot of that comes from when um something is seen as, oh, that's hard to get. You want it more, and I would love to hear from whoever's watching. If there's some men that's on, I would love to hear from you in terms of that, of what I'm saying right now. Women, anyone who's on who wants to share, please do. We'd love to hear from you as well, and any thoughts or comments that you might have. But I feel like if we normalize this, then the men won't have that oh my God, I need this, like, oh my God, that drive. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I kind of get where you're going. Like the more sort of common it is to
Yeah.
express that we are sexual beings, the less likely there will be sort of
Thank you.
attitudes, predatory attitudes towards bodies. Women's bodies, trans bodies, children's bodies. That's kind of the idea. Is that what I heard? Like the more we talk about it, the more it'll reduce this kind of predatory attitude.
Exactly. Thank you. You heard
Sure,
right.
I can read your mind. Yeah,
That's
I
what's good to have two
totally.
people.
I think that's part of it for sure, for sure. I think I mean I think as we're also sort of thinking about what suicide prevention means um for us, for people today, I want to ask, how much of that has to do with what we're talking about? How much does that have to do with the fact that we're not talking about um to children, what it means to be in your body, what it means to explore yourself sexually, what it means to have autonomy over your body, what you, that you can't have people accessing your body without consent. How much of the lack of those conversations has to do with the abuse that happens that can
Mhm.
then lead to deteriorating mental health, depression, and suicidal tendencies, right? So, um, yeah, I think sexual health is directly related to suicide prevention.
Mhm. Oh, for sure. And there's no coincidence, right? That
Mm.
they're both in the same month, Sexual Health Month and Suicide Awareness, right? And then May you have Masturbation Month and mental health. It's all connected, right? It's
Mhm,
it's it's so connected. So,
mhm,
and I agree. Like I feel like when we have autonomy over our bodies and ourselves, it strengthens us. It strengthens
mhm,
us
mhm,
emotionally, mentally
mhm,
as well. And
mhm,
sexual health is a form of resistance, right? It's a
mhm,
form of resistance to depression, to oppression, to so many different things,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
And so, one of the things when I've worked in crisis centers and I've worked with a lot of people with depression, um, it's one of the things. They're not connected to their bodies. They're not connected to
Mhm.
themselves. They don't
Mhm.
have relationships with their families. And so I think,
Mhm.
when we can have these relationships with our families, with our bodies, and we talk about sexuality, we talk about different things, that actually just shows the level of connection that you have in general
Mhm.
with your family.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so, when people are suffering in silence with their sexuality, like in cuties with these little girls, like this little girl, like, not only could I see girls becoming suicidal, but this girl in the movie pushed another girl in the water just so
Mm.
that she can dance in her place. And so it messes with you psychologically. It really
Mhm.
does. And
Mhm.
I've worked with so many kids where they're not feeling like they're fitting in. They're trying to have sex to fit in, or they're doing these different things, and then
Mhm.
they feel bad, right? I've
Mhm.
also been there when I've had sex with multiple partners for different reasons, trying to fulfill something, right? To feel
Mhm.
more connected to myself, but I felt
Mhm.
empty afterwards. And
Mhm.
so many times, these little kids or just women in general, they feel
Mhm.
that emptiness after having sex.
Mhm.
And then it's like, what's going on with my life? Like,
Mhm.
why am I doing this? And then they start to
Mhm.
feel bad about themselves, and
Mhm.
it leads to a depression,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, and yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. All of that, Renee. And I wanted to sort of I hate the word take advantage, but I'm going to say it in this context. I wanted to um we need new language. I wanted to engage with your talents and gifts as a therapist. That's way better. And I wanted to ask you if you could share both with me and with our audience, as a mental health professional, as a therapist of many different modalities, um, thinking about mental health and also suicide prevention. What are some um, things that we can do, if we like, how can we recognize this tendency in somebody? If
Mhm.
somebody confides in us that they're having these kinds of thoughts, what is it that we can do to be supportive, to be, but also proactive? And I would hate to sort of put the wrong steps in action that aren't actually helpful
Mhm.
for someone in that state. So I think
Right.
it'd be great if you could share like what
Yeah.
you've seen.
Yeah. So it's important to really just observe, your friends, your family. And so many times people won't talk about it. So many times people won't say, hey, I'm feeling like killing myself, or I'm
Mhm.
feeling like my life is not worth it here. So we have to really be able to notice when somebody's personality is changing. So a lot of times when someone is changing, um, you might see them becoming more withdrawn. So
Mhm.
they're not going out so much, or they're just staying home more so than they used to, or they're becoming aggressive. Some of the big signs are when people start sharing personal things with you when they've never done that, or they're giving things away to you. Because basically it's like they're
Mhm.
planning to 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 commit suicide. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
they're going to start opening up and sharing things with you, giving things away to you, and you're like, why is this person giving away this thing that meant so much to them? So just
Mhm.
being able to notice these signs. And right now it's even more crucial because so many of us have been in this quarantine, and so we
Mhm.
know that the suicide rates have gone up. People are
Mhm.
suffering so much in silence. They're not able to go out, and one of the things that helps to decrease depression is having that touch, right? Being able to touch other people, to hug, to talk. So really just checking in. And when
Mhm.
you check in, not just what you traditionally do, hey, how you doing? And not really wanting to know how the person's doing, but asking questions, especially if it's a friend and you haven't spoken to them and for so long, and you used to speak
Mhm.
to them every day. Or if
Mhm.
you happen to notice that their personality is changing a little bit, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. And I think sometimes people think that if they ask, they're going to put the idea in the person's head, and you're not going to put the idea in the head. So if you feel like the person might be that depressed, you could ask, like, are you giving things away? Are you feeling like you don't want to be here on this
Mhm.
earth? Are you feeling like you don't want to be around anymore? Ask. And it's okay to ask, you know. And so I think
Mhm.
that this whole thing of open and honest communication and talking and asking questions, we're afraid to do. So
Mhm.
even with sexuality, we feel like if we're asking these questions, it's going to make someone do it. But it's
Mhm.
important to have these conversations, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. I myself sort of tiptoe around the questions because I never know what is this question that makes sense for the given moment.
Hmm.
So if there's other suggestions you have about good questions to ask, so you're suggesting that one is be direct and ask if someone is feeling like they don't want to be around anymore, like they
Hmm.
just want to give up. So that's okay to ask. I've been like, do I ask that kind of question? But it's actually
Hmm.
okay. It's
Yeah, it's
something that
okay. Yeah, because
means
we
you're
get a
listening.
yeah, it means you're listening and that you really
Mhm.
care and that you
Mhm.
notice. So the
Mhm.
person is like, okay, this person actually noticed there's something going on with me.
Mhm.
But when you don't ask, if you try to act like everything is okay, then they're like, well, this person doesn't care. They don't even want to know.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think that's a big thing.
Mhm.
There's a lot of suicide prevention hotlines,
Mhm.
so you could always find a local suicide hotline number that you can give to them. And I have a number here that I could put up. And so you could have them call. I used to when I worked at the crisis center,
Uh-huh.
people would call who was suicidal and we would talk to them, we just talk. And don't freak out just because the person says that they're feeling suicidal and think you have to like send them automatically to the hospital. But,
Mhm.
you know, it's important if they do say it, you ask them, well, would you act on it? Or are you just feeling that way? Because sometimes people just feel that way, but may not
Mhm.
necessarily act on it.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so it's important to be able to ask, okay, would you act on it? And then like, how would you? Because then you would know, because then the person would be like, oh, well, I bought a gun the other day, or I've been
Mhm.
saving up my medicine.
Mhm.
Don't put those words in their mouths. Just ask, like, well, have you thought about what you would do if you
Mhm.
were doing it? So it's okay to ask those questions. Then you kind of get a feel to know, okay,
Mhm.
how serious this person is and what the chances are. So that way you can decide, I need to
Mhm.
call a hospital.
Mhm. Mhm.
And each
Mhm.
state is different. So I know that, where I last worked in the state of Maryland, if someone talked about being suicidal, we could do an emergency petition, and then they would be
Mhm.
evaluated by a psychiatrist,
Mhm.
and then the
Mhm.
psychiatrist would decide, and they would keep them up to 72 hours while they were
Mhm.
deciding. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's one of the safest things.
Mhm.
It's not easy to do at all. It's not easy,
Mhm.
but if needed, you have to see in your state what does that look like.
Mhm.
Sometimes just a family member calling a crisis center and letting them know, or emergency room and letting them know. Other states, you might have to actually go through the police and do, you know, um, a process through the police station. So it just depends on each state.
Mhm.
Then that becomes an issue if you have to call the
Mhm.
police. Like, you know, do you do that? Do you put your family at risk, especially if they're, African American, Black, Brown, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
a risk target, woman?
Yes.
So there's so many different
Mhm.
things to think about, and that's why it's important to just ask first, and then ask,
Mhm.
have you thought about what you would do, so you could
Mhm.
see, kind of
Mhm.
get an idea.
Yes. Yes.
Also,
Hotlines
just
are.
kind of, yeah, hotlines are important. Also, just sometimes, have you seen an increased alcohol use or drug use? Are they drinking more?
Mhm.
Because sometimes people start to use more drugs or alcohol just to kind of numb what they're feeling,
Mhm.
you know? And
Mhm.
right now with the whole COVID, it's more time to be sensitive, to really
Mhm.
notice what's happening and what's going around with your loved ones,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so I think one thing people can do for folks who are in the States and also when you're abroad, there has been a big movement of establishing mental health crisis first response. I know in California and in the Bay Area, there's been a hotline set up that's a mental health crisis hotline that you can call if you or someone is having a mental health crisis and don't want to engage the police. There's mental health professionals, specialists, caseworkers who are ready and trained to deal with a mental health crisis that might go beyond what you can handle. So definitely, you can Google search mental health crisis hotlines or response in your area. I know when I was living in Brazil, in Salvador. So for folks living abroad, you can definitely check in with your local. So a lot of states and cities have like secretaries of health, and a lot of them have secretaries of women's health and women's rights. That's something that's been growing in Brazil even more. And in Salvador, these these like departments, they have different locations throughout the cities. And so, if you just type in Secretaria das Mulheres, they'll show up like a specific center. Secretaria da Comunidade LGBT. So there's also an LGBT rights and safe departments that are growing in different areas of the cities that are also designed to be places where people can access mental health services as well. So, just for folks who are abroad and either looking for something for someone or for themselves, these are sort of like public options available. Um, yeah, so I don't know if there's anything else Renee, living in Rio, but I know when I was in Salvador, those were some resources that I would
Hmm.
engage in.
Yeah, no, those are some good resources all throughout Brazil. They have the CVV, CVV, which is specifically for that, to prevent violence,
Hmm.
suicide, and there's a national number. So if you Google CVV, let me see. I don't know if
I think it's
CVV.
Centro. I can't remember. Centro de Violencia, something,
Centro
something.
Violencia. Yeah. So yeah, but if you Google that wherever you are,
Hmm.
and I do believe that that's national, so it will be anywhere that you are within Brazil, and you just
Hmm.
do the CVV, you'll find the telephone number.
Hmm.
And I used to have it, but um, I don't remember the number right now. So, but yeah, that's easy to be found. I'll type that in right here.
Sorry, folks.
CVV.
It's a day full of many, many avenues. But yes,
Yes.
CVV in Brazil, Secretary
Yeah,
of
the national.
Women. There's local secretariats of women all over Brazil and all over the cities. Secretaria das Mulheres. They're called CRAS, Centros de Referência de Assistência Social. So any CRAS, those are any reference centers for social work assistance for anyone in situations that might need casework or mental health. So these were centers where, when I was in different situations where women would come to our space. So I used to run a cultural space, and some people actually thought it was a safe house. And so we got a number of inquiries a lot of times of people looking, is this a safe house? Can I come? I'm in a situation. And so we learned through that, through having this space, what the options were for women, where they could access those services. So
Yeah.
any CRAS, Centro de Referência de Assistência Social in Brazil, has options for offering this kind of help for people. Yeah.
And the CVV is the Centro de Valorização da Vida. So
Mhm.
it's the Center for Valuing Life. And that's
Mhm.
the website, www.cvv.org.br. So that's a really good website. I actually volunteered there for a while,
Mhm.
so people could call in. And this was at the beginning of the quarantine that I started
Mhm.
volunteering there, just to kind of be an ear for people to come in and talk. And honestly, that's one of the things. A lot of times when people come to us and they're depressed, we feel like we want to give them a solution, but
Mhm.
sometimes we don't have to give them a solution. Sometimes just
Mhm.
being an ear and
Mhm.
listening
Mhm.
helps a lot. And so just being there and allowing that person to talk to you can make the world of a difference. World of a difference. So
Yes, Renee.
if I could just recommend one thing, listening, um, a nice hug and just holding them and letting them know that you're there for them and you're holding that space, that goes a long way.
Yes, it does.
Yes.
It does. And in these COVID times, even a virtual hug
Yeah.
means something. It means something. Okay, Renee. So I think that's, yeah, I don't know if you want to share anything else in relation to sort of these resources. I'm going to send to you the names of some of the things I just named. There is also a collective of therapists that are women identified, both cis and trans, who offer, free, low cost therapy for women in Brazil. And this collective, I have a couple of good friends who are a part of it. It's called Muitas PC. You can access them on Instagram. Oh, sorry, Muitas with an A, not an O. Sorry, Renee.
No,
I
it's
typed it
okay.
wrong. So muitas PC. So for folks also in Brazil, either wanting for themselves or for other folks who want to access, this grassroots effort of therapists who got together and wanted to make therapy accessible to women and women identified femme folks. Definitely access muitas PC.
Uh, Achimo. Great.
Yay!
Okay, so guys, I'm zenned out. I was in nature all day. I could barely do a complete thought. But anyway, I hope you guys got something out of this.
I think we did good, Renee. I think these are tough, trying times.
Tough
We're
trying
not
times.
tough, trying times, and being real. We're being real,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, we are.
I this week have been a mess
Yeah,
with my communication with Renee. It's been difficult. I've been up and down. My mom had surgery. There's just things in our lives that get in the way sometimes, and I think it's
yeah,
okay. And I think, we're being our full, complete, honest selves, full of high moments, low moments, funky
yes,
moments, but that's who we are.
yeah. That's who we are. That's who we are.
that
We're
doesn't
we're
mean that
human
doesn't
beings.
mean
Yes.
right. That doesn't mean
Yeah,
that we're
yeah.
not going to speak up about what we think is important, however that
All
comes
right.
out. So here's to sexual health, here's to mental health, here's to
Yes.
suicide prevention, here's to uplifting ourselves and our people in these really difficult times. We have to remain hopeful. We have a lot ahead of us, but we can do it. And we
And
have
yeah.
to be there. And for folks who want to like do something, if you're like, I need to do something, make sure this idiot doesn't continue another 4 years. Check out seedthevote.org. It's a great organization that is having folks do canvas phone calling or text messaging to folks in swing states with on the ground organizations. So I've been doing that every week, just an hour a day. An hour a week is something that can help shift the situation. So
Oh, good.
that's it,
So
folks.
I will do that because next week I will be in the US.
Oh,
Alrighty. I'm heading to the DMV. So I'll be in the US for 2 weeks. And yeah, so
hey,
you know
this
what I do
side.
want to say. So I'm gonna check out the seed the
Seed the
vote.
vote.
So
Yes.
yeah, because I definitely want to be active while I'm there. But I want to thank you, Nefertiti, for honoring that like where we are right now, and that's so
Mm-hmm.
important because I
Mm-hmm.
think that so many times, especially when we're in the limelight all the time, and like
Mm-hmm.
I do so many lives, is like all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I put a lot of pressure on myself as well, like where I have to be like, this professional and whatever, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of shit going on.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, it's affected me this week. It's been a
Mm-hmm.
very heavy week. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why I needed to be in nature. Like I didn't work all day today. I was in nature, like I'm zenned out. And like coming back here, I think it was just coming back and getting back to be on YouTube on the screen. I think it's like sensory overload. Like I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that was just the nature. And now I got to actually talk and think about serious stuff. So that's a
and
lot.
type and put, yeah,
Yeah.
we're
So
operating in multiple realities, and
yeah,
that's hard sometimes and weird.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we're doing the best we can.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you for giving permission to be human, and
Of
thank you for
course.
being giving permission to feel, because that's so important. That's so important.
Yes. It's
So
Libra season. That's why.
yes, Virgo season just ended. Now it's Libra season, and you have a birthday in what, 2 days?
Yes. 3 days. So it's Monday. It's my birthday. So I'll be celebrating.
Yes.
It's been 8 years since I've been with my family. So I'm excited about celebrating on this side.
Nice, nice, nice.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys for
Thanks,
coming on and
everybody.
watching. Thank you those who are gonna watch and who makes it up until this end. If you make it to the end, you a true soldier, and we love you. All right. Well,
Bye,
have a good
folks.
night.
Have a good
All
one.
right. Have a great one. Bye.